All right, we'll come to order, and we will now go on the record. My name is Earl Lewis. I am the Chief Engineer of the Visual Water Resources, Kansas Department of Agriculture, and I will be the hearing officer today. I am in Manhattan, Kansas, and with me are KDA's Chief Counsel, Kenneth Titus, Staff Attorney Kelly Novinsky-Wenzel, and our court reporter. Today we'll be holding a public hearing in the matter of the designation of the Wichita County Local Enhanced Management Area in Wichita County, Kansas, or WHC LEMA, that's L-E-M-A, as we will refer to it. Today is Friday, November 20th, 2020, and the time is 9 a.m. We're conducting today's hearing partially in person, but also connected with some of the hearing participants via Zoom video conferencing. For those that want to observe the hearing today and not necessarily participate by giving testimony, the hearing is being live streamed on KDA's YouTube channel, and the video of the hearing will be archived and available on KDA's website for later viewing. We are also connected via Zoom to the St. Anthony Catholic Church Parish Hall in Leoti, Kansas, where the Western Kansas Groundwater Management District No. 1, or GMD1, is hosting a space for the public to attend and participate in the meeting. Because we want to make the hearing as clear and complete as possible, we have required that anyone who wants to give oral testimony at today's hearing from a location other than Leoti to make arrangements 24 hours ahead of time. And likewise, for anyone wanting to share visual presentations, we required that the presentation be provided to us 24 hours ahead of time so it can be displayed during the oral testimony. If you wanted to include a visual presentation but did not provide it by the deadline, I will still accept it as written testimony if you get it to me within the next 2 weeks. If you have not done so already, I would ask that for everyone present at St. Anthony Catholic Church Parish Hall, please sign the attendance sheet. If you plan to testify, please indicate that on the sign-in sheet. Additionally, a record is being kept in Manhattan of those individuals testifying from a location outside of Leoti. If anyone wishes to testify today, has a time constraint, and needs to leave early, I ask that you let Mike Meyer know and we will accommodate if possible. Thank you each for taking time today to attend this hearing related to the significant matter related to the management of groundwater within Wichita County and GMD1. This hearing is being held pursuant to KSA 82A 1041, which governs the establishment of a local enhanced management area, or LEMA. This is the second of 2 hearings to consider the designation of the WHC LEMA according to the management plan proposed by GMD1. Pursuant to KSA 82A 1041B, timely notice of this public hearing was published in the Scott County Record on October 15th, 2020, and the Wichita County Native Sun on October 14th, 2020. Additionally, each water right owner within the boundaries of the proposed LEMA was also mailed an individual notice of this hearing. This hearing process was formally initiated in April when Christopher Badel, the then acting chief engineer, found that the WHC LEMA management plan submitted by GMD1 was acceptable for consideration. As part of the hearing process, it was necessary to hold an initial hearing to determine if the three initial requirements for approval set forth in KSA 82A 1041 were satisfied. The 3 initial requirements established in KSA 82A 1041 are: does the area within the proposed boundaries of the WHC LEMA meet one or more of the circumstances specified in KSA 82A 1036 A through D? Is it in the public interest to require corrective control provisions in that area? And are the proposed geographic boundaries of the area reasonable? The initial hearing was held by Mr. Badel on August 14th, 2020. The hearing was a virtual hybrid hearing via Zoom with the opportunity to provide in-person testimony at Leoti, Kansas. Mr. Badel issued an order on September 16th, 2020 that determined the 3 initial requirements for approval set forth in KSA 82A 1041 were satisfied. As a result of that determination, I am holding the second hearing as required by KSA 82A 1041B and C to consider the designation of the WHC LEMA according to the management plan submitted by GMD1. As outlined in the pre-hearing order, today I will accept oral and written testimony regarding the WHC LEMA management plan. When we've heard the last oral testimony, I will adjourn the oral testimony portion of the hearing, but we will leave the record open and continue to accept written testimony until December 4th, 2020, which is 2 weeks from today. The order of events today will be that first we will hear from GMD1, then we will hear from the Division of Water Resources, and finally we will hear from anyone else who would like to give oral testimony. GMD1 and Division of Water Resources are recognized as formal parties and are each represented here by legal counsel. While I am not expecting a formal examination of witnesses, I understand that counsel may assist representatives providing oral testimony and ask clarifying questions as necessary. As noted in the pre-hearing order, I will not be strictly applying the rules of evidence in these proceedings, and I will allow clarifying questions. I expect the clarifying questions will bear some reasonable relationships to the testimony presented by each witness. Overall, my purpose is to ensure that each party has the fullest opportunity to be heard and present evidence for the record. Next, oral testimony may be provided by any member of the public, including water right owners, businesses, organizations, or anyone else that wishes to place a comment on the record. I may ask clarifying questions of anyone who provides oral testimony to ensure that we have a complete record. While you may not be a formal party here or be represented by legal counsel, know that your testimony will be carefully considered as I seek to decide this matter. Additionally, individuals may also ask clarifying questions. However, such questions shall not constitute a formal cross-examination or an attempt to undermine someone's testimony. If a person testifying wants to answer such questions, that person is free to do so. If any person wishes to respond to a question in writing following the hearing, they will be allowed to submit written testimony after hearing within the time period allowed. You may also provide your comments or questions in the form of written testimony. The written testimony may also include rebuttal based on anything you hear today. I will accept written testimony today, so if you are at the Leoti location, please provide it to Mike Meyer. After today's hearing, you can email your written testimony to Rhonda Hutton, that's ronda.hutton@ks.gov, or you can mail your written testimony to WHC LEMA, care of Rhonda Hutton, 1320 Research Park Drive, Manhattan, Kansas, 66502. The deadline for submitting that testimony is the close of business Friday, December 4th, 2020. If you are providing written testimony by mail, it must be postmarked by this date. This testimony will become a part of the record and posted on KDA's website along with any other written testimony received today and prior to December 4th, 2020. Since this hearing may be only held following an initial hearing, I am incorporating the record from the initial hearing conducted on August 4th, 2020, and the complete record from that hearing into the record for this hearing. This includes the order entitled Findings and Order Establishing Initial Requirements for the Designation of a Local Enhanced Management Area dated September 16th, 2020, the transcription from that initial hearing, and the testimony presented during the initial hearing. This record has been marked as Exhibit A and is hereby adopted. Prior to today's hearing, we have received pre-filed written testimony from GMD1, the Division of Water Resources, Frank Mercurio with Upper Smoky Hill Regional Advisory Committee, Don, Earl, Luke, and Andrew Smith with Smith Family Farms, and Charlie Hughes with the City of Leoti. The testimony has been posted to KDA's website, and to the extent the testimony is not presented here today, it is incorporated into the record in these proceedings. As we receive written testimony, it will be posted to KDA's website. I would like to remind everyone that this hearing is being transcribed by a court reporter, so to ask that you speak clearly so she can hear you. Please remember that only one person may speak at a time. Before you make your comments, please state your name and address before you begin testifying. Finally, please remember that the primary purpose of this hearing is to determine whether I should designate the WHC LEMA according to the management plan proposed by GMD1, including the adoption of corrective control provisions proposed by GMD1. If the WHC LEMA is designated and the management plan is adopted, it will result in corrective controls being placed on existing water rights within the proposed WHC LEMA boundary. This decision must be supported by a record of this proceeding. It is appropriate to provide testimony regarding groundwater conditions, the management plan's sufficiency to deal with those conditions, and any other topics that you believe are relevant to the criteria set forth in KSA 82A 1041, or to my ultimate decision whether to designate the WHC LEMA. Does anyone have any questions before we begin? Okay, hearing none, I will now call upon Tom Adrian and Joseph Ullman, attorneys for GMD1, to come forward and call the witnesses to testify on behalf of GMD1.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer, for those remarks and clarifying the purpose of the hearing. We will have one witness. That will be Kyle Spencer, who is the manager of the Western Kansas Groundwater Management District #1. And so we would now ask him to step forward and provide his testimony.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kyle Spencer. I'm the manager for Groundwater Management District #1, located in Scott City, Kansas. We have provided the hearing officer and the Division of Water Resources with our written testimony, and we ask that it be added to the record. My oral testimony will highlight this written testimony, and then I will answer any questions if you have any. As the hearing officer stated, the question today is whether the Wichita County LEMA plan will achieve its goals. We believe it will. Our testimony and evidence show that our LEMA plan will meet its goals, and it will preserve the future of the High Plains Aquifer for the future of all of its users. Today, I'm going to briefly highlight a few elements of our LEMA plan, including its goal and how the corrective controls are adequate to reach that goal. I also will discuss a few specific provisions in our LEMA plan and how those provisions are both legal, proper, and necessary to achieve the LEMA's goal. On September 9th, 2020, the acting chief engineer issued his findings in order that all the initial requirements from the initial hearing were met and set the matter for subsequent hearing. Specifically, based on the hearing record and its resulting findings of fact, he found that as a matter of law, groundwater levels in the proposed LEMA are declining and have declined excessively, that the rate of withdrawal in the proposed LEMA exceeds the rate of recharge, that the proposed LEMA is in the public interest, and that the geographic boundaries of the proposed LEMA are reasonable. Because these findings from the initial hearing were favorable, the hearing today is limited to the proposed LEMA plan, whether it is sufficient to address any of the conditions found by the chief engineer in the initial hearing, and whether the proposed LEMA should be adopted as proposed. This LEMA plan is sufficient to address the conditions found by the chief engineer and should be adopted as proposed. The following is a summary of the major provisions of the LEMA plan and a discussion of the LEMA plan's goal. The LEMA period is from 2021 through 2025. The LEMA goal is to limit irrigation withdrawals to 246,882.786 acre feet during the 5-year LEMA period. This number is the sum of the allocations provided in Attachment A to the LEMA plan and assumes no voluntary enrollment of vested rights. The LEMA allocations reduced reported pumping during the 2009 to 2015 period by no more than 25%. Years of no reported use are excluded from the calculation of the legal average, and where the legal average use is below 20% of the annual authorized quantity, the allocation is based on the legal average use without further reduction. Where the legal average use is above 20% of the annual authorized quantity, but a 25% reduction would result in less than 20% of the annual authorized quantity. The allocation will be 20% of the annual authorized quantity times 5. Allocations provided under the LEMA will be given a 5-year amount. In any year, the annual LEMA allocation may be exceeded, but not the water rights annual authorized quantity. Should the LEMA continue after 2025, the LEMA plan recommends any unused LEMA allocations be carried forward to a new LEMA plan. The LEMA plan allows for the creation of combined well units for multiple wells physically tied together. In such cases, allocations for the group can be moved between wells, provided no well exceeds its annual authorized quantity, and water right changes may be required to gain approval. Vested rights are exempt from the LEMA's corrective controls and cannot be combined with other water rights unless voluntarily enrolled. Any vested rights voluntarily enrolled will be subject to the LEMA's corrective control provisions and then be part of the LEMA's combined well units. Where water users have implemented voluntary conservation during the 2009 through 15 period, they may appeal their allocation. For years in which the owner documents their past voluntary conservation, a flow rate test will be conducted by GMD1 or DWR to determine if the capability of the well or wells under appeal can exceed the historical use average. The resulting flow rate will be multiplied by 150 days to establish a test result quantity. The greater of a historical use or test result quantity shall be reduced by the 25% conservation factor. Water rights on land not owned, leased, or otherwise previously controlled or pumped for any of the years from 2009 through 2015 by the Farm Services Agency producer of record as of January 1, 2020, shall be allowed an appeal with a flow test. We have estimated that if the allocations allowed under the LEMA plan are fully used over the 2021 through 25 5-year period, the average water use will be reduced by approximately 14.7% from the average use during the 2009 through 15 period. As I will discuss later, it is expected that actual reductions from historic use will be greater. Further, as the allocations provided in Attachment A to the LEMA plan do not include the results of appeals allowed pursuant to the plan, which could increase some allocations and water use, our testimony provides evidence that the stated goal can reasonably be expected to be achieved. The proposed LEMA is tailored to adequately meet its goals of addressing the excessive water level declines and withdrawal rates exceeding recharge by reducing water use in the areas of Wichita County within GMD1. GMD1 has set a goal tailored specifically to reduce declines within the High Plains Aquifer of Wichita County, thereby extending the aquifer's useful life for the long-term benefit of that area. The goal was developed using reliable geological and hydrological data. The proposed LEMA reduces water use to the level necessary to meet our stated goal, while at the same time includes an appeal process and special considerations for unique cases to safeguard the rights of its users while accomplishing its goals. As mentioned, the proposed LEMA's corrective controls will reduce the historical use of irrigation rights by limiting withdrawals to the stated goal. This number is based on the 2009 through 15 water use collected by the Division of Water Resources and as reviewed by the Garden City Field Office of the Division of Water Resources, with each holder's specific allocations calculated by that office. Our goal for limiting irrigation withdrawals was specifically tailored in light of available data. At the initial hearing, Brownie Wilson with the Kansas Geological Survey reported on the result of KGS's study that found a 20.02% reduction in the average annual withdrawals from the aquifer would stabilize the water levels for the coming decade or two. Thus, the full use of the allocations under the LEMA's proposed corrective controls will accomplish a significant part of the reductions needed to address the declining groundwater levels. The proposed LEMA allows for an appeal process for water right holders who have implemented voluntary water conservation during the 2009 through 15 period and those who claim an error in the calculation of their allocation. The proposed LEMA also allows special considerations to be given via the appeals process for water rights not owned, leased, or controlled during the 2009 through 15 period by the FSA producer of record as of January 1, 2020. Acknowledging it is difficult to quantify how many appeals will occur, or to what extent they may impact the LEMA's goal, we expect the impacts to be minimal compared to the counterbalancing elements I will discuss in a moment. While the appeals process may increase allocations and use to a limited degree, there are several factors that will more than offset any potential additional pumping from these appeals. I will highlight these factors briefly in my oral testimony. However, more details are provided in our written testimony. First, as I said, the proposed LEMA exempts vested right holders. We assumed for the purposes of ensuring we meet our stated goal that each vested right will use 100% of their annual authorized quantity each year for a total withdrawal of 20,645 acre-feet over the 5-year LEMA period. However, vested right holders are unlikely, if not incapable, due to declining well capacities, of significantly expanding their use during the LEMA period. Based on a review of the historic use of vested rights, we estimate it is reasonable to expect vested rights to use just over 15,000 acre-feet less than we assumed over the proposed LEMA period. Additionally, vested right holders may voluntarily enroll in this LEMA, the Wichita County WCA, or develop their own WCA, further reducing water use. Second, roughly 20% of the water right holders in the proposed LEMA are enrolled in the Wichita County WCA. Those users are voluntarily reducing their water use by 29% or more in the initial 7-year period of that conservation area, with the reduction ultimately increasing to 36% during the LEMA period. Like vested rights, the allocations in the LEMA plan do not account for less use by the water rights enrolled in the WCA. An analysis by DWR comparing the WCA and LEMA allocations for those water rights enrolled in the Wichita County WCA shows the WCA's additional restrictions can be expected to reduce water use by over 5,000 acre-feet more than the assumed LEMA plan's allocations over the 5-year period. Additionally, enrollment in the WCA is still open, and there may be new participants over the period of the proposed LEMA, resulting in further reductions. Third, the proposed LEMA plan assumes, for the sake of safe planning, that all water right holders will use 100% of their LEMA allocations. This is factually unlikely. Past results from multi-year allocation programs, such as LEMA's, have shown most participants typically use less than allocated when enrolled in flexible use plans. For instance, in the Sheridan 6 LEMA, it achieved a water savings of 32% over the planned 20% water savings. Fourth, the historical use period used as the basis for calculating the proposed LEMA allocations contains 2 years, specifically 2011 and 12, in which a major drought impacted Wichita County, necessitating much greater withdrawals from the aquifer. Including these years provides water users with an increased ability to deal with another drought during the LEMA period. It is also reasonable to assume that absent another drought, the proposed LEMA's target goals will be easier for these agricultural users to reach. Water right holders are given the ability to file an appeal with the GMD1 Board of Directors regarding their allocation under the proposed LEMA. Following a timely appeal, water right holders may present to the GMD1 board evidence to support their appeal basis, and following the receipt of all evidence, the GMD1 board may grant the appeal, deny the appeal, authorize a flow rate test, or issue a new allocation to the holder based on the evidence presented or other evidence available from DWR or other official sources. As is further discussed in our written testimony, this appeal process, the district's work with, and notice to all water right holders and these LEMA hearings fully satisfies the state's requirements under KSA 82A 1041, Section A5, regarding due consideration for prior conservation and implementing reductions in use, as well as the procedural due process requirements under the Constitution. Water right holders will continue to be informed by GMD1 as we move forward. GMD1 has been very supportive of its holders, water right holders who wish to conserve water, as the entire Wichita County community is well aware of the declining water levels in the High Plains Aquifer. GMD1 is committed to ensuring that any water right holder who has voluntarily curbed their own water use for the benefit of the community isn't penalized for doing so under the corrective controls of this LEMA. The proposed LEMA does not apply corrective controls to non-irrigation users, but encourages them to develop best practices, which many have already done in light of the declining water supply. The combined total use of stock, municipal, and industrial withdrawals from the aquifer account for 3.6% of the total water use during the historic use period. Because these users' withdrawals are minimal, and because the goal of stabilizing the aquifer can be met through other corrective controls, no restrictions were placed on these users. Further, the proposed LEMA provides recommendations for each type of use and requires the board to review the annual water use reports of each type of user. Should any non-irrigation user start withdrawing water from the aquifer at an increased rate that would negatively impact its longevity, the board can address this impact should it renew the LEMA after the 5-year period. Finally, stock and industrial users are common and primary economic drivers of Wichita County and the surrounding area, and are oftentimes the end user of many of the commodities created by the irrigation water users. This proposed LEMA was specifically tailored to minimize impact disruption in Wichita County. And the board fears that placing restrictions on these end users may have unanticipated economic upstream effects in Wichita County. Because of this, and because these non-irrigation users' impacts on the aquifer are already minimal, and the proposed LEMA does not contain any corrective controls for non-irrigation use. While the proposed LEMA does not specifically address the priority of water right users in its corrective controls, other than exempting vested rights, priority of water rights are explicitly and implicitly considered and protected in the plan. Explicit in the plan is that should any user under the proposed LEMA claim impairment, the plan expects the chief engineer to investigate and exercise his authority to address that impairment, including giving consideration to water right priority. This provides the chief engineer the ability to make decisions regarding impairment on a priority basis, thus safeguarding the priority rights of users. Beyond this, the proposed LEMA implicitly safeguards priority rights. The plan's proposed corrective controls will reduce pumping from the aquifer, and the resulting effect of stabilizing the aquifer delays and reduces the potential of future impairment claims. Priority of water rights become legally important when impairment occurs. But if no impairment occurs, then there is no need to consider priority, and that is what this proposed LEMA will accomplish through stabilizing the aquifer. Finally, this proposed LEMA need not explicitly address priority beyond the considerations noted above, because the term of the proposed LEMA is a temporary 5-year period, and it does not completely deprive any user from their ability to withdraw from the aquifer. The proposed LEMA is not a government taking that would rise to the level of a constitutional violation. This is discussed more in our written testimony, and I'll respectfully refer you to that document for that discussion. The proposed LEMA requires all monitoring to continue under state guidelines. This includes individual responsibility for ensuring water flow meters are in good working order and that the annual reporting is completed. Should these items not be met, the well in question shall be assumed to have pumped its annual authorized quantity along with any other corrective provisions recommended by the chief engineer. Additionally, should a water right holder be found to have exceeded their allocation or otherwise intentionally disrupted the discovery of actual water withdrawals, The holders are subject to the provisions of the Kansas administrative regulations, which include potential civil penalties and monetary fines. These compliance, monitoring, and enforcement elements should not cause undue burdens on the holders under this proposed LEMA, because these are the requirements these users have or should have been in compliance with prior to the LEMA implementation. Additionally, the penalties are ones already established by state statute and regulation, and thus impose no additional measures that could potentially be found punitive or otherwise unenforceable. The proposed controls in the proposed LEMA are necessary to reduce pumping in Wichita County, to protect existing water rights and extend the useful life of the Ogallala Aquifer. Within Wichita County, 225 water rights comprising 448 wells have been permanently dismissed as a result of the lack of supply, and an additional 346 active points of diversion had no pumping record during the 2009 through 15 period. This indicates the area needs management for long-term benefit. The board carefully crafted its plan to reduce use, while a significant number of the water rights will have 5-year allocations based on 75% of their average use during the 2009 through 15 period. This remains reasonable, as the period includes 2 years of severe drought. Also, as pumping rates continue to gradually decline over time, using water history of the 2009 through 15 period as a basis for the 2021 through 25 allocation period will lessen the actual impact to water users. An important element of the LEMA plan is its 5-year allocations, wherein water users can plan for the best use of their full supply to maximize the economic return from this water. As has been determined in the Sheridan 6 and Wet Walnut Creek Iguga and elsewhere, in such cases, water users adapt from the mindset of maximum annual returns to maximizing economic return per acre foot pumped. For example, in the Walnut Creek Iguga, a 23% reduction in groundwater resulted in a mere 1.2% reduction in corn output. Studies of that Iguga further showed no significant short-term or long-term decreases in property values due to water use restrictions. From all the above data, it is reasonable to expect the long-term benefits of the LEMA plan outweigh potential short-term limitations, economic or otherwise. So in conclusion, this proposed LEMA should be accepted and approved by the chief engineer. It has been specifically designed around reliable scientific data, which supports the LEMA plan's corrective controls to reduce irrigation water use and declines in the High Plains Aquifer of Wichita County, extending the life of the aquifer there. The corrective controls are sufficient to meet the plan's stated goal, contains counterbalances to increases in allocations from the plan's appeal process, and additionally, the proposed LEMA complies with the law and with the LEMA statute. It contains appeal provisions to ensure each holder's constitutional rights are respected, and has compliance and enforcement provisions to ensure the rules of the LEMA are respected as well. This proposed LEMA represents a long and thoughtful process by GMD1 and the water users of Wichita County to conceive a plan that will preserve the High Plains Aquifer while still allowing a productive and profitable agricultural use of the land. This proposed LEMA also represents thoughtful input by the Division of Water Resources, as it was willing to informally review this plan prior to submission to ensure it met all requirements under the law. And that informal review led to what we hope is a comprehensive and satisfactory plan that will allow the High Plains Aquifer to benefit Wichita County for years to come. This concludes my testimony. I will now stand for questions, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. For the record, I take note of your written testimony, which was previously provided and will be entered into the record as Exhibit B. Do you have any other exhibits that you want to put on the record today?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
I can hear him.
No, he does not. I have a couple of clarifying questions, if I could, Mr. Spencer. First, for the sufficiency question, you mentioned, I think, stabilizing the aquifer. What do the projections show as how long the life of the aquifer would be extended?
How long will it be extended if,
You need to, Kyle, you need to move closer there. We can't hear you.
okay,
Thank you.
yeah, I'm sorry. How long will the aquifer be extended?
Correct. How long the life of the aquifer will be extended?
I'll have to say I don't have any projection at hand, so I would have to say that we would provide you a written answer in the next 7 business days. And I would also say that that's probably what we will do with all questions asked today, because everyone at the district wants to make sure that the concerns and questions are taken seriously. And we think providing a written answer is the best way to do that.
Understand that. That's fine. Thank you. The other question I had, and again, I think this is fine to provide a written response. When you talk about, you noted the economic evaluations from Sheridan 6 LEMA and the Walnut Creek Iguga. Do you have any plans to evaluate the economic impact or benefit of the implementation of Bulimia should it go forward?
Well, yes, I think as the LEMA moves forward, we're hoping to be able to compile some economic data to, you know, provide, to provide economic data of the impact of the LEMA. Obviously, we have none at this time, directly, obviously.
Understand. All right, I don't have any more questions for you at this time. I might, based on others' testimony before we're done. Does anybody else have any clarifying questions for GMD1? All right, hear no clarifying questions, so I appreciate your testimony and your time today, Mr. Spencer.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Do you have any other witnesses or comments, testimony from GMD1?
We do not.
All right, thank you. I will now call upon Stephanie Murray, attorney for DWR, to call witness to testify on behalf of DWR.
Thank you. DWR does have planned testimony from 2 witnesses, Lane Letourneau and Mike Meyer. I would ask Mr. Letourneau to present his testimony first.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. My name is Lane Letourneau. I am the program manager for the Kansas Department of Agriculture's Division of Water Resources. And my testimony has been provided as written, and I won't read my testimony into the record, but I will highlight my written testimony. As the agency that administers the Kansas Water Appropriation Act, we want to provide testimony in support of the Western Kansas Groundwater Management District's proposed LEMA. We believe that the data put together by Brownie Wilson of the Kansas Geological Survey used in the development of this LEMA plan is very reasonable, and we believe that the corrective controls proposed by this plan will be effective to slow the groundwater declines in the county. We've reviewed the proposed management plan, and we believe that the corrective controls contained herein are reasonable and they're in the public interest, and they will be effective in helping with the groundwater declines in the Ogallala Aquifer, and they are narrowly tailored for the affected area. So We believe that the present rates of the groundwater depletion throughout the proposed LEMA are unsustainable and can be further remedied with this LEMA. And and then I want to talk about the allocations. Folks were concerned about how the allocations were established based on historical use, because we have to, by statute, take into consideration for past conservation. Well, the allocations are established by historic use, but as Mr. Spencer pointed out in his testimony, this LEMA provides for an appeal process. And so someone can appeal to the board, and they can show the board that they've had past conservation, so they will get credit for past conservation through that appeal process. Therefore, we feel that this meets the criteria of being in the public interest regarding the past conservation. Now, as Mr. Spencer also talked about, DWR feels that the corrective controls proposed by this LEMA, they protect existing water rights, and they adhere to prior appropriation that is required in the Kansas Water Appropriation Act. And while the LEMA plan provides for allocations to be established without regard to priority, priority will still be considered if impairment occurs, if there is interaction, water right to water right, then the senior water right will prevail. And of course, we will investigate that like we would any other impairment complaint. So we do feel that this LEMA still protects the prior appropriation doctrine. Now, as Mr. Spencer pointed out, the proposed plan does not regulate vested water rights. The Water Appropriation Act won't allow the administration of water rights. The only way the Water Appropriation Act affects a vested right is abandonment. But if folks want the flexibility of that vested water right, they can bring that vested water right in voluntarily. And then we also, we're not economists, but we feel that this will help the economy of the area, because it'll make the water last longer. And so with the water being there longer, the economy should be better longer. And then we just have to say that we appreciate the groundwater management district. We appreciate the folks that are already in the water conservation area and the local citizens taking this important step to help manage their groundwater. We recognize the difficulty of self-regulating, a neighbor regulating a neighbor, but this is very important that they do put the limits on themselves then to help make the aquifer last longer. And they are extending the life of the Ogallala, and this will help the agricultural driven economy in the area. And with that, that's my verbal testimony. And of course you have my written testimony. And I'll stand.
Mr. Letourneau, I do have your written testimony. It'll be entered into the record as Exhibit C. I don't have any clarifying questions for you. Does anybody else have clarifying questions for Mr. Letourneau? All right, hearing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Ms. Murray, you may call your next witness.
Okay, thank you. I would ask Mike Meyer to present his testimony now.
Good morning. My name is Mike Meyer.
Mr. Meyer, can you move closer so we can hear you better?
Sure. Good morning again. My name is Mike Meyer. I'm the Water Commissioner of Kansas Department of Agriculture, Division of Water Resources, and Garden City Field Office. As Garden City Field Office staff has worked most closely with the Western Kansas Groundwater District Number 1 in developing this local enhanced management area plan, I want to provide testimony in support of the plan, including the corrective controls contained therein. Our office assisted GMD1 staff in analyzing data that was used in the development of the LEMA plan. specifically the historic water use data that will be used to establish the allocations under the plan. Historic water use was calculated using average pumping over a 7-year period that included both wet and dry years, which is appropriate given that groundwater use is heavily dependent upon precipitation. Additionally, the LEMA's plans use a 25% reduction from historic use when setting allocations is reasonable. With continued groundwater level declines and limited aquifer storage available, such a reduction is appropriate to achieve the plan's goal of limiting irrigation use to the 246,882.786 acre feet during the LEMA period. The water savings produced, if this goal is met, will be meaningful to extend the aquifer supply. My staff is also equipped to assist GMD1 with administration of this LEMA as needed, if ultimately designated, and the plan explicitly provides for this assistance in several places. My office supports the designation of this LEMA and feels confident that continued collaboration between DWR and GMD1 will enable this LEMA to achieve its goals, resulting in the advancement of water conservation for the long-term benefit of this entire area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. I've got your pre-filed written testimony. It'll be entered as Exhibit D. I don't have any clarifying questions. Does anybody else have clarifying questions for Mr. Meyer? All right, thank you for testimony.
Thank you.
Ms. Murray, do you have anybody else or are there any other exhibits we need to enter into the record?
I do not.
All right, thank you. Now it is time for the public to provide oral testimony. I'd ask that you please come to the computer when I call your name. We're going to start with Frank Weedle. I hope I'm getting your name right. Please state your name and address and then begin your testimony concerning the designation of the WHC LEMA and the management plan proposed by GMD1.
I am Frank Weedle. I live here in Leoti, 1012 West County Road K in Leoti. And my comment is in support of the LEMA. And I'll just give you some of my thoughts that occurred to me a few days ago. We were traveling from actually McPherson to our home here in Leoti. We went through Rush Center, and then Ness City, and Dighton, Scott City, Leoti. If you go on west, you get to Tribune. And of those 6 cities, Rush Center is pretty much dried up. Ness City is supported by oil and gas. Dighton is barely hanging on. They do have a little irrigation north of town, but that town is getting smaller daily. Scott City is vibrant, lots of water. Leoti, I'd say, is stabilized and has, we're driven by industries that depend on irrigation water. Tribune, a little less, but again, a little less water, but they seem to be stabilized. But let's go to Towner. They're dried up. Sheridan Lake is gone, pretty much gone. Brandon, non-existent. Eads is barely. The common denominator is water. If you have it, you survive. If you don't, you'll go away. I have 2 grown children that live in Leoti and have businesses. And those businesses depend on an economy of some sort. And in this area, that's water. I also have 5 grandchildren here, and I hope, actually, I have 6 grandchildren here in Leoti, and I hope that they would have the opportunity to come back and be part of this community as well. I shudder to think that someday they may not be able to come back and they'd end up in a town like Portland or Seattle, where it's okay to pillage and steal and rob and burn, but you can't go to church. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Weedle. Appreciate your comments. Do you have anything else you'd like to enter on the record today?
No.
Okay. I don't have any clarifying questions. Does anybody have any clarifying questions for Mr. Weedle? All right, hearing none, thank you for appearing today.
Thank you for your time.
Next, I'm going to call on Brian Valk, who is on the Zoom session. Brian, if you're available, can you please turn on your microphone?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yes, my family has been in Wichita County for many years. First came here in 1887. I'm the third generation on my farm that my grandpa started, but technically the fifth. I firmly believe that there is a need for conservation. I just have some issues with the way that it's being addressed. I believe that there is a simpler way that this could have been done. And the Sheridan Six has been mentioned several times. And by using, a straightforward allocation of acre inches across the board would have been a simpler way to handle this. I believe that the way this LEMA is proposed and set up is going to result in lots of appeals in regards to allocations. I also, my last thing would be the the boundaries. I feel that it should be a GMD1 wide LEMA instead of just a Wichita County LEMA. And that's those are my concerns or comments today, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Valk, for your comments. Do you have anything else you want to enter onto the record today?
No, sir, not at this time.
Great. Does anybody have any clarifying questions for Mr. Valk? Hearing none, thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Next, I call on Tammy Simmons, who I believe is in Leoti at the Parish Hall.
Can you get closer?
Can you get a little closer or speak up? We can't quite hear you, Ms. Simmons.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My name is Tammy Simmons, and I live at 885 North County Road 18, Marienthal, Kansas. My husband and I farm and ranch with our family in Northeast Wichita County. First and foremost, I am mom to Anna, Addison, and Morgan. I represent the fourth and fifth generations of our family who have engaged in agriculture here since 1915, so for over a century. I also serve our public as an elected Board of Education member for the Leoti Wichita County School District, USD number 467, for the past 7 years. I am very concerned about the impact that water, or the lack of it, has on not only my family's future, but also the survival of our education system, so that all 409 of my kids in our system have the best chance of meeting their full potential in life. My purpose today is to show that the corrective control provisions of the proposed Wichita County LEMA are sufficient, and they are also absolutely necessary for our community's immediate future and that of the next generation. National Geographic magazine published a 25-page article focusing solely on the Ogallala Aquifer in August of 2016, with the headline, "To the Last Drop," and also a secondary headline, "Invisible Crisis, a Vanishing Aquifer." To say the world is watching might be an exaggeration, but to say our nation is following closely what happens in the breadbasket of its heartland is not an exaggeration. The time is now to take action to preserve our way of life for future generations. Some even say it's too little too late. I may still be young and naive, but I believe that we still have a fighting chance. I am always looking to leave things for my kids and all kids here better than I found them. I have been involved in this water conservation effort in Leoti since the Wichita County WCA meetings began in March of 2016. And finally, here we are today with one of the major tools that will help get our area to the real, meaningful water conservation that we had only hoped was possible 4 years ago. The stated goal of this LEMA is to limit irrigation withdrawals to 246,882.786 acre feet during the 5-year LEMA period. The evidence is clear that this LEMA plan and its corrective controls will reduce the major water usage of this county, that is, water used for irrigating crops, by a certain percent. While the plan states in black and white that it is a 25% reduction in irrigation withdrawals, one must realize what that means in actual practice. This actually equates to the average irrigation water use being reduced approximately 14.7% from the historical average from the years 2009 to 2015. That actually falls short of the stated goal that the Kansas Geological Survey recommends of a 20% reduction of total use for all uses in the county, which include irrigation, stock water, municipal, and domestic uses. Vested rights will still have their full use, but they can voluntarily enroll in the LEMA. Some producers are already waiting with their appeals to the GMD board so they can get an increase in allocation. While the LEMA plan as it stands is sufficient to reduce water usage enough to meet its own stated goal, the GMD board and DWR must remain vigilant and hold to their ultimate purpose of sustaining the aquifer's life as long as possible when considering appeals and how those will affect our overall big picture for the future. Let's remember that the water underneath us is meant for the use of all Kansans. That is, not a few property owners, but all Kansans. Over 96% of the water use in this county supports a robust agricultural-based economy and is controlled by a small percentage of the general population. However, the absolute most important attribute of water is for it to sustain the very lives of 100% of our population. Sustaining life for all our families, neighbors, and friends is the ultimate goal. We have been called and commanded by our Creator to love God and love our neighbors as ourselves. We must obey that command by sacrificing and making changes to our use of natural resources today, or we will have to face the dire consequences of not acting today within just the next decade. By combining this LEMA plan's corrective controls with the success of the Wichita County Water Conservation Area and the forthcoming comprehensive USDA RCPP titled Groundwater Recharge and Sustainability Project, we are on the way to meaningful water conservation and preserving our way of life for years to come. That is all I have, Mr. Hearing Officer.
Thank you, Ms. Simons. I apologize for messing up your name to start with. Do you have anything else that you'd like to enter onto the record today?
No, sir.
All right. Are there any clarifying questions for Ms. Simons? Hearing none, thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to provide oral testimony today?
You might ask Lizzie to unmute so we can confirm. I don't know if they actually have control over their ability to mute.
Can the, Lizzie, can you unmute the folks that are on the Zoom to make sure that if there are folks that want to testify?
Mr. Hearing Officer, this is Chris Spadel. We do not have the ability to unmute unilaterally. Folks are in control of their own microphones.
All right, thank you. Thank you. All right, I have a couple of additional questions. Well, first, before I do that, I want to note the written testimony provided by Frank Mercurio, and it will be marked as Exhibit E. Written testimony provided by Don, Earl, Luke, and Andrew Smith with Smith Family Farms, which we marked as Exhibit F. And written testimony provided by Charlie Hughes with the City of Leoti, which will be Exhibit G. Now I have additional question that I'd like for GMD1 to, and I understand, provide a written response to before the December 4th deadline. So my question pertains to questions that were raised by the Smith Family Farms regarding the selection of the date by which an appeal must be filed, and the reasoning behind the selection of a 150-day limit multiplied by the pumping test rate, and the sufficiency of that for the appeal of the allocation. If you can provide additional information on that before December 4th for the record. Is there again, one final call, if there's anybody else who wants to provide either oral testimony or have clarifying questions for anybody that has provided testimony today? Okay, hearing none, we will close the oral testimony portion of this hearing. You're free to provide written testimony, whether or not you have provided oral testimony. Remember that all written testimony must be submitted or postmarked by December 4th, 2020. Anyone may submit additional written testimony before this date, and your written testimony will also be made a part of the record of this hearing. Information is available on KDA's website with the instructions for submitting written testimony. As we receive written testimony, it will be posted to KDA's website. We will also post the transcription of this hearing on our website when it becomes available. The record will be closed on December 4th, 2020. After the record is closed, I will review the record and make a decision on how to proceed pursuant to GMD1's request. Just as the statute has 2 separate hearings for a successful LEMA process, it also requires at least 2 separate orders. First, pursuant to statute, I have 120 days to issue an order of decision regarding this order. I have the following choices. 1, accept the LEMA plan as sufficient to address any of the conditions set forth in KSA 82A 1036A through D. 2, reject the LEMA plan as insufficient to address any of the conditions set forth in KSA 82A 1036A through D. 3, return the plan if it is determined to be deficient with the reasons and the option for the GMD to revise and resubmit the plan. Or 4, return the plan to the GMD with specific suggestions for improvement which the GMD can accept or reject. If the order of decision accepts the WHC LEMA management plan, then I will subsequently issue an order of designation designating the area as a LEMA and ordering the specific control corrective controls within WC LEMA management plan. I appreciate your appearance and your testimony here today. Before closing the hearing, I would ask one last time if anyone wishes to offer any additional oral testimony or anyone has any comments on the procedures from here. As one final comment, I want to thank everyone that's participated, the GMDs, DWR staff, and each of the folks that testified here today. Obviously, this is a significant action, whether the decision to move forward occurs or not. Your commitment to improving the conditions there locally, both from the groundwater perspective and the economy, should be applauded. And we'll make a decision, obviously, within 120 days regarding the sufficiency of of the plan. Thank you for your participation. The record for oral testimony in this matter is now closed. I will leave the record open and will accept written testimony until Friday, December 4th, 2020, which again is 2 weeks from today. Thank you for your time, and this hearing is closed.